The moment you wake up each morning, the story begins again. A flicker of memory returns, a sense of I reassembles, and the world takes shape around it. You check your phone, recognize your face in the mirror, recall who you are. It feels natural, inevitable, that there's a thinker behind the thoughts, a self steering the ship. Yet across both neuroscience and ancient philosophy, a strange idea keeps emerging. Maybe that center you feel so deeply isn't really there. For centuries, mystics and philosophers have whispered that the self is an illusion. The Buddha called it anatta, non-self. The Upanishads spoke of a cosmic consciousness underneath every individual. Modern science, in its own way, is beginning to agree. When neuroscientists peer into the brain, they don't find a command center or an inner observer. They find a network, a decentralized web of neurons constantly firing, predicting, updating, and generating the feeling of continuity. The you that you experience may be less a pilot inside the cockpit and more a narrative composed on the fly. This paradox, the intimate feeling of being someone versus the evidence that no such independent someone exists, is at the heart of what it means to be conscious. The paradox is also deeply emotional, because if the self isn't real, what does that say about love, memory, and meaning? Are our lives just stories neural tissue tells itself? Or is there freedom in realizing the storyteller is part of the story? Across cultures and ages, people have found different answers to that same unease. The Buddhist monk dissolving the sense of ego in meditation. The neuroscientist observing the default mode network go quiet on a scan. The poet writing that the universe is the dream dreaming itself. These aren't separate discoveries. They're the same revelation wearing different clothes. They all hint that consciousness doesn't sit inside the skull like a flame in a lantern. It's more like the sky itself, containing everything, born fresh in every moment. To examine this idea is to walk a tightrope between science and spirit. On one side, the measurable activity of neurons, on the other, the ineffable experience of awareness. But when looked at closely, the two begin to blur. The machinery of the brain can't fully explain consciousness, yet consciousness can't be separated from the machinery. Somewhere within that interaction lies both the source of our individuality and the key to our illusion of it. So we begin here, at the edge of that paradox, with a question that may never be resolved but must always be asked. If the self is a story, who is telling it? And to answer, we have to look at where stories are born, not in words, but in electrical signals, in patterns of firing neurons weaving perception into a seamless narrative. Beneath the poetry, beneath the philosophy, lies biology. A geometry of connection that builds mind from matter, and somehow creates the haunting echo we call me. The human brain is often described as the most complex object in the known universe. Around 86 billion neurons communicate through trillions of synapses, forming a living network that never stops changing. Each neuron is unremarkable by itself, firing or staying silent depending on the flow of ions across its membrane. Yet together, they form an emergent symphony, a pattern of interactions so intricate that from it arises thought, feeling, and awareness itself. The origin of this network begins deep in evolutionary history. Early life had only chemical signals, molecules passing information cell to cell. Over hundreds of millions of years, those signals became specialized, tiny electrical currents evolving into what we now call neurons. In a jellyfish or a worm, those cells simply coordinate movement. But as nervous systems scaled, something unexpected appeared: the capacity to model the world and to model the organism within it. The mind began to form. Within your own skull, something similar happens each millisecond. Neurons group into populations that handle sight, sound, touch, and emotion. Yet no single population commands the rest. There is no king neuron, no center of experience. Instead, cognition emerges from competition and cooperation, billions of micro-decisions balancing each other like voices in a choir. When brain regions synchronize, coherent consciousness arises. When that synchronization slips, awareness fractures. During sleep, anesthesia, or trauma. It's within this dynamic theater that the illusion of self finds its stage. One network in particular, called the default mode network, becomes active when you're daydreaming, planning, remembering the past, or imagining the future. In other words, when your mind turns toward itself. It stitches experience into a timeline, rehearses conversations, constructs identity. Yet, if this network is disrupted, through meditation, psychedelics, or sensory deprivation, the sense of I begins to unravel. The world remains, perception continues, but the observer seems to vanish. Neuroscientists studying this phenomenon have started to realize that consciousness may not depend on one area, but on the interplay between many. Brain imaging shows constant communication between large-scale networks. Those responsible for attention, sensory input, and self-reference continually push and pull against each other, adjusting balance moment to moment. The experience of being a self may simply be the result of this dynamic equilibrium, a delicate pattern of information regulation the brain constructs to keep track of itself. Another layer of this emergence is predictive coding, the idea that the brain is not a passive receiver, but an active predictor. Each moment, it generates internal models of what it expects to see, hear, or feel, updating those models when reality disagrees. This prediction loop saves energy and lets us respond quickly to our environment, but it also creates separation. To predict, the brain must maintain an internal image of a perceiver distinct from what's perceived. Thus, the self may have evolved as a useful fiction, a boundary drawn to manage uncertainty in a chaotic world. But the same mechanism that built our sense of individuality also hints at its impermanence. When predictive loops quiet and sensory experience is allowed to flow unfiltered, the partition between subject and object weakens. This is not speculation. Brain scans of experienced meditators show reduced prediction error signals during deep absorption. Experience becomes raw and immediate, less about labeling, more about being. Still, the neuron remains the basic unit of this revolution in understanding. Consider its design: an axon sending signals, dendrites receiving them, synapses modulating strength based on experience. Every memory you have, every skill you learn, rewires these junctions through tiny molecular changes. Identity itself is a form of synaptic plasticity, the past etched into the connectum of the brain. Yet because those connections are constantly remodeling, your self is as fluid as weather. The continuity you feel is statistical, not absolute. When neuroscientists map these networks, they see motifs repeating across scales, clusters connecting into modules, modules linking into systems. It's a fractal architecture, a pattern appearing from the microscopic to the macroscopic. Even the rhythms of neural oscillations echo across frequencies, like gears within gears. From this perspective, consciousness is the harmony of nested patterns, each influencing and being influenced by the rest. Emergence explains why no single neuron knows who you are, yet the network as a whole does. It's similar to how a colony of ants navigates, or how murmuring starlings form a single fluid shape in the sky. Awareness arises from interaction, not from parts alone. And that realization opens a profound question. If consciousness can emerge from a network of neurons, could it also arise from larger scales, the social, the ecological, the cosmic? As the science deepens, the boundaries we draw between brain and world begin to blur. Every sensory input reshapes neural wiring. Every thought is an ecological event in miniature. The biological blueprint is not a closed circuit, but an open exchange, tuned by environment, culture, and relationship. The self, according to this view, is not housed within tissue. It's distributed across the many systems that sustain it. And so the paradox of self returns, illuminated now by biology. The neurons tell a story of emergence, not essence, of process, not permanence. What you call me is a living pattern, a network within networks, borrowing stability from ceaseless change. To explore what that means for consciousness, meaning, and liberation, we have to follow this network beyond the skull itself, into the space where brain meets world and neuron meets nirvana. When scientists first began scanning brains during rest, they expected quiet. They believed the mind at ease would show minimal activity, like a machine idling in neutral. Instead, they discovered the opposite. Even in stillness, an intricate network of regions lit up together. Midline structures in the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate, the inferior parietal lobes. This constellation became known as the default mode network, or DMN. It hums whenever attention turns inward, when thought drifts toward memory, imagination, or self-reflection. In other words, when you're doing nothing, the self is most alive. At first, researchers thought this network was simply mental noise, the brain filling silence with daydreams. But closer analysis revealed its function was far more central. It's the narrator of experience. The DMN links fragments of memory into a unified timeline, recalls who we've been, predicts who we might become. It tracks our status in social hierarchies, replays regrets, rehearses apologies. It maintains the sense of continuity that keeps yesterday's I aligned with today's. Without it, life would still happen, but it would lack story. This is the neural mechanism of ego. The default mode network creates a virtual character, a model of me placed within woven narratives of past and future. Activity within the medial prefrontal cortex integrates emotional valence, how I feel about events. The posterior cingulate anchors those evaluations to autobiographical memory. Together they create a center of gravity, binding perception around an interior reference point that experiences the world as mine. The evidence for this is vivid. When the DMN is disrupted, the boundaries of identity can blur or dissolve entirely. Neurological patients with damage in these areas may retain intelligence and memory, but lose a stable sense of ownership over thoughts and actions. Conversely, hyperactivity in the same circuitry correlates with rumination, anxiety, and depression, the mind stuck inside its own narration. The self, it turns out, can become both anchor and prison. Meditation offers one of the clearest windows into this process. In experienced practitioners, fMRI studies show a striking reduction in DMN activity during deep concentration. The constant chatter of me quiets, replaced by heightened connectivity between networks governing sensory awareness and attention. Subjectively, this feels like vastness, an open presence without edges. The mind doesn't disappear, it simply stops inserting commentary between perception and reality. The narrative loop loosens, revealing experience before it's labeled. Similar patterns appear in psychedelic research. Substances such as psilocybin and LSD temporarily disintegrate the DMN's integrity, measurable as decreased coherence among its nodes. Participants often describe ego dissolution, the sensation that the boundary separating oneself from the environment has vanished. Their reports align with brain data. The less network coherence, the less subjective separation. What's left is raw awareness flowing through sensory and emotional circuits without narrative mediation. The world becomes immediate, unfiltered, whole. Predictive coding theory helps explain why this network feels like you. The brain continuously constructs models to anticipate sensory input. The DMN provides the broadest model of all, predicting how experiences relate to a stable agent, the self. It minimizes surprise by generating a consistent storyline. When that predictive apparatus goes offline, reality pours in unmodeled, and the experiencer seems to dissolve. Awareness remains, yet without an owner. But total disengagement of the DMN isn't always enlightenment. Sometimes it's pathology. In certain neurodegenerative diseases or trauma, damage to midline regions can erase autobiographical memory or self-recognition. The goal, then, isn't eradication, but balance. Learning to use the network without being used by it. Mindfulness, therapeutic introspection, and creative flow states foster a flexible ego, one that narrates when needed, but steps aside when direct experience calls. That flexibility reveals the DMN's evolutionary purpose. Our ancestors survived by simulating futures, imagining threats, strategizing social alliances. The self model gave them a rehearsal space for action without real-world risk. What if I fail? May cause anxiety now, but its ancient version helped foresee danger before it happened. The problem emerges when the rehearsal never ends, when the mind mistakes simulation for reality. Then the brain's greatest survival tool becomes the root of existential suffering. Neuroscience is beginning to see the DMN not as villain or saint, but as storyteller. It shapes identity through constant narrative stitching, reminding the organism who it is and where it belongs. Yet, like any storyteller, it can also over-edit, trimming the vastness of experience into something too familiar. Moments of awe, silence, or deep empathy briefly disrupt the editorial process. In those cracks, the boundaries of self shine transparent. Studied from this angle, the Buddhist teaching of anatta, non-self, is not mystical, but neurological. The self is a process, not a possession, continuity without a core. The DMN weaves that illusion to coordinate memory and prediction, but awareness itself precedes the weave. When monks speak of liberation, it isn't about annihilating the self, it's about recognizing the storyteller while resting in the raw presence that doesn't need a story. In the rhythm of ordinary life, the DMN switches on and off dozens of times a minute. You drift into thought, return to sensation, lose yourself in narrative, rediscover the moment. Every flicker is a rehearsal of awakening, ego forming, dissolving, forming again. Seen this way, the network is not an obstacle to transcendence, but its stage. Without the illusion, there could be no insight into illusion. The brain offers both the cage and the key, both narrative and silence, and learning their dance may be what wisdom truly means. For most of life, the mind runs in habitual loops: thought, reaction, memory, prediction. Consciousness seems to orbit the familiar narrative built by the default mode network. But in certain moments, that orbit weakens. The chatter fades, a different rhythm takes over, and awareness slips into alignment with something larger than itself. Meditation, creative flow, even the intensity of athletic performance, each offers a portal into this altered coordination of the brain's networks. Meditation begins as a simple act, placing attention on breath or sound. At first, the DMN resists, flooding the silence with commentary. But with practice, the oscillations between regions start to change. Neuroimaging shows synchronized low-frequency waves linking attention circuits in the prefrontal cortex with sensory areas. The network that tells the story of me breathing gradually quiets, leaving only pure sensation, air moving, chest rising, temperature shifting. Awareness remains, but the narrator pauses. As focus deepens, the brain shifts into patterns once reserved for sleep. Alpha and theta rhythms, associated with calm and inward attention, dominate. Then, in advanced concentration, bursts of high-frequency gamma activity emerge, rapid oscillations that bind perception and emotion into a unified experience. It's in these moments many practitioners describe non-duality, the sense that breath, body, and consciousness aren't separate phenomena, but facets of a single field unfolding in real time. Outside of meditation halls, similar patterns appear in moments of creative flow. Artists lost in their work and athletes in peak performance display a comparable brain signature. The DMN, which normally evaluates and predicts, drops into partial silence while sensory and motor networks synchronize. Decision and action merge. The self as overseer steps aside. What's left is effortless precision, painting, running, composing, not from deliberation, but from direct participation. Psychologically, flow states differ from effort. They arise when challenge meets skill. Neurologically, they reflect a shift in balance between networks. The attention system becomes dominant. The salience network filters noise, and the DMN retracts. Dopamine surges reinforce focus, time perception warps, and subjective boundaries soften. The experiencer often reports afterward, "It felt as if something larger was doing the work." From the brain's perspective, That something larger is simply wider integration, neurons firing in coherent rhythm across previously independent regions. EEG recordings help visualize this process. During deep meditation or effortless flow, the normally fragmented electrical landscape becomes harmonic. Alpha and gamma oscillations phase lock, meaning separate areas of the cortex beat in time. This coherence allows information to travel efficiently, weaving perception, emotion, and motor control into a seamless whole. The subjective feeling of unity corresponds to objective synchrony. The brain's music tunes itself into resonance. This harmony may be the bridge between the neural and the mystical. When electrical activity aligns across the cortex, subjective separation diminishes not through magic, but through physics. The same mechanism that lets musicians lock into rhythm or crowds sync their movements might scale inward, within the skull, until awareness perceives no gap between player and instrument, observer and observed. In that rhythm, the self becomes transparent, and consciousness experiences itself without boundary. Such alignment carries emotional consequences. Studies of advanced meditators show that increased gamma coherence correlates with heightened compassion and reduced fear reactivity. When networks synchronize, regulation between emotional and cognitive systems improves. Empathy flows unforced. The mind ceases to defend its border and begins to resonate with everything it perceives. In neurochemical terms, serotonin and oxytocin modulate social attunement. In experiential terms, love feels less like relationship and more like recognition. Psychedelic research echoes these findings. Under psilocybin, synchronized gamma waves sweep across the cortex as the DMN disintegrates. Volunteers describe oceanic boundlessness, merging with surroundings, communion with life. Neuroscientists caution against reading spirituality into oscillations, yet acknowledge that the accompanying sense of connectedness often leads to enduring psychological benefits: reduced depression, increased openness, and sustained empathy. The brain, freed from its habitual partitioning, rehearses unity and sometimes remembers it afterward. Flow, trance, prayer, immersion. Each is a doorway through which the brain glimpses peace, not by adding experiences, but by subtracting interference. When synchrony prevails, information flows without friction. The sense of, "I am doing this," gives way to, "It is happening through me." This isn't mystical detachment, but optimal integration, a state where prediction and perception align so closely that reality feels intimate, unfiltered. What matters isn't how one enters, via meditation, art, or pharmacology, but what one sees from within. That awareness doesn't belong to a localized self. It is an emergent property of rhythms in harmony, a field that arises whenever the noise resolves into coherence. The ancient term for this state was samadhi or absorption. The modern term might be global neural synchronization. Both describe the same event, the brain tuning itself to the frequency of its own wholeness. When that coherence fades and the DMN resumes its narration, the self returns, refreshed, perhaps humbled. Yet something lingers, a quiet intuition that the borders are porous, that beneath the story, consciousness is a single vibration reverberating through countless forms. Each meditation, each moment of flow, is the network remembering its nature. The neurons hum in collective rhythm, and for a while, the illusion of separateness becomes transparent, showing what lay beneath it all along, awareness inseparable from the universe it perceives. For as long as humans have explored their own consciousness, there have been gateways, moments when the walls of identity melt and perception swells beyond the limits of language. In ancient temples, this was prayer and meditation. In modern laboratories, it's a measured dose of psilocybin or LSD. Different paths, same precipice, the point where the self dissolves. Neuroscience enters this territory cautiously, yet what it finds echoes the oldest mystical maps. When volunteers undergo psychedelic sessions in controlled environments, brain imaging reveals a remarkable pattern. The default mode network, that storytelling system of me, begins to fall apart. Its nodes, normally synchronized in maintaining personal narrative, lose coherence, while previously separate networks start to talk freely. The brain becomes globally interconnected, yet less self-referential. Subjectively, people describe it as merging with everything, or as if the universe has breathed them out of itself. Colors sharpen, boundaries blur, emotion floods perception without filter. Underneath those poetic reports lies measurable data. Cortical oscillations once confined to specific regions expand in range and amplitude, creating what researchers call entropy. The rigid hierarchies of the brain loosen. Information flows unconstrained. The mind becomes more flexible, capable of reordering itself. It's tempting to call this chaos, but in practice it behaves like an opening. The same dissolution that erases the ego also dissolves defensive patterns, those neural loops of habit and trauma that trap thought in repetitive grooves. Many participants report lasting changes long after the compound fades. Less fear of death, a renewed sense of connection, a reduction in depressive rumination. The breaking of the self's boundary appears to let new possibilities in. Ancient traditions spoke of similar transformation without chemistry. The mystics of India practiced breath retention or fasting until visions erupted. Christian contemplatives described union with God so overwhelming the I ceased to exist. Sufi poets wrote of burning away the self in divine love. Strip the metaphors away, and the experiences share a signature. Temporary quiet of the narrative mind, replaced by undivided awareness. The language differs, the mechanism may not. A growing field of research compares psychedelic states with deep meditation. In both, the DMN contracts, brain regions governing sensory and emotional processing form novel connections, and gamma coherence sweeps across the cortex. One might say that meditation trains the brain to walk the path that psychedelics sprint down. Both, at their best, reveal the transparency of identity. The difference is control. The monk guides descent through discipline. The volunteer rides biochemical wind. Yet the destination, the realization that awareness persists without the story of self, can be profoundly similar. Moments of so-called ego death are often reported as simultaneously annihilating and compassionate. The separation between observer and observed collapses. Pain and beauty merge into immediacy, too vast for commentary. When language returns, many speak of being reborn, their priorities recalibrated toward empathy and presence. Neuroscience frames it as neural reorganization, but the lived sense is moral as well as perceptual. Still, dissolving the self isn't inherently benign. Without preparation, the mind confronting its boundarylessness can panic. Clinical researchers emphasize set and setting, mindset, environment, guidance as crucial variables. A safe atmosphere allows the experience to unfold as insight rather than terror. Historically, spiritual traditions supplied such containment in ritual and mentorship. Today's science is rediscovering that same necessity. The parallels stretch deeper than physiology. Both psychedelic and mystical paths reveal how perception creates the illusion of separation. The brain's predictive coding relaxes. Sensory input floods in unfiltered, reminding awareness of its embeddedness in everything it once considered other. A tree breathing, a friend's face, the movement of air, all appear as continuations of the same process. It's not imagination, it's recognition. From an evolutionary view, such boundary loss might offer adaptive resets. By momentarily suspending the self-model, the brain escapes rigid predictive loops and explores new configurations. Creativity, healing, and awe arise from this flexibility. What mystics call surrender, neuroscience might define as the system's self-optimization through entropy and reintegration. The labels change, the transformation feels the same. To grasp what this means experientially, imagine the moment the DMN lets go. Thoughts no longer originate from a center. Emotion no longer belongs to you. The visual field brightens, edges blur, and perception collapses into pure happening. Time stretches until it loses meaning. Then, gradually, patterns reassemble. The narrator returns, carrying the memory of its own absence. For some, that memory never fades. It becomes a compass pointing back toward simplicity, toward presence. Across cultures, this dissolution has always been interpreted as revelation, the human system seeing itself as part of a larger totality. Whether named God, Brahman, or cosmic consciousness, the underlying realization is unity. Neuroscience cannot confirm the metaphysics, but it can describe the mechanics, how turning down one network reveals the continuity of all others. The veil between self and world was neural all along, sustained by rhythm and habit. After such experiences, people often speak in contradiction, of losing themselves yet becoming whole, of nothing remaining yet everything shining clearer. That paradox is the hallmark of awakening. In neural terms, integration replaces segregation. In human terms, compassion replaces isolation. When identity loosens, empathy expands, not because morality improves, but because the sense of other has dissolved. Psychedelics and mysticism thus meet where brain and cosmos overlap, in the realization that consciousness isn't a possession inside the head, but a field appearing through it. When the self disintegrates, awareness doesn't vanish. It widens, encompassing all it once excluded. The neurons keep firing, but their song no longer praises an individual. It hums the same tune heard across meditation halls, cathedrals, and research labs, the sound of the network remembering itself. Each era of human evolution rewires how minds connect, but the digital age did something new. It externalized cognition itself. In just a single generation, we built a neural network outside the skull, an electronic mirror of our collective thought. The internet began as an exchange of information, but soon it learned to remember, anticipate, and respond. Every message, search, and scroll became part of a global feedback loop. Billions of nodes pulsing with attention, prediction, and desire. In some sense, the human brain has replicated its architecture across the planet. Consider how your phone feels almost like an extension of your nervous system. Notifications trigger dopamine bursts. Touchscreens respond to gesture as instantly as muscle memory. You think of a name, search it, and information appears before the thought finishes forming. The latency between intention and result has nearly vanished. That immediacy collapses the boundary between inner thought and outer world. Each tap and swipe is a synaptic event in a global cortex. Technology doesn't just accelerate communication, it transforms the structure of consciousness that uses it. The philosopher Marshall McLuhan once said, "Every new medium is an extension of a human sense. The wheel extended the foot, the book extended the eye, the internet extends the brain." But extension also means amputation. What the tool amplifies outward, it diminishes inward. Memory outsourced to cloud storage, reflection replaced by reaction, solitude traded for constant connection. From a neuroscientific perspective, the feedback loops of digital media hack the same mechanisms that sustain identity. The default mode network loves narrative. It tracks status, compares, imagines futures. Social platforms exploit that engine, feeding it an endless stream of me versus them, before and after, look who I am. Each scroll becomes a rehearsal of selfhood, a microdose of validation or rejection that strengthens the circuitry of comparison. The more the network activates, the tighter the self-model clings. The ancient Buddhist struggle against attachment now plays out through algorithms tuned for engagement. Yet the same technology that magnifies ego can also reveal its artificiality. Online, identity becomes fluid. Avatars, usernames, curated selves that multiply and dissolve across platforms. You're one person in messages, another in photos, another in thought. The brain adapts effortlessly, maintaining each persona through rapid narrative switching. Live long enough in that space, and the illusion of a singular, consistent I begins to fray. Our digital multiplicity mirrors the neural truth. Selfhood is plastic, performed, contingent on context. On a larger scale, collective cognition has begun to behave like a planetary mind. Vast data centers hum as neurons. Fiber optic cables serve as axons. Social networks act as hemispheres of thought. Trends emerge not through intention, but through interaction, memes evolving like ideas in a shared dream. Just as individual neurons don't know the thoughts they help form, no single user understands the total pattern of global consciousness. But step back, and you can see coherence, shared attention, synchronized emotion, digital empathy or outrage, rippling like waves of neural activity across continents. This digital brain reflects humanity's own cognitive architecture: predictive, emotionally charged, meaning-seeking. Artificial intelligence, built on neural networks inspired by biological ones, now analyzes our behavior and responds with new stories. Each algorithm learns to mirror us ever more precisely. In doing so, we teach machines the habits of mind we barely understand ourselves. They complete our sentences, recommend our dreams, and in return, pattern us with feedback loops as invisible as synapses. The convergence raises an existential question. If consciousness arises from interconnected processing, could a sufficiently vast technological network itself become aware? Neuroscience debates whether integration and feedback are enough for subjective experience. Theories like integrated information suggest that mind emerges wherever information loops back on itself with sufficient complexity. By that logic, the global web is already a primitive organism, not conscious like us, but dreaming in ones and zeros. For now, its sentience is metaphorical, but the metaphor is instructive. Technology externalizes what consciousness already does internally: link, predict, simulate, integrate. Each notification is a ping in the planetary cortex. Each human interaction, a microsynapse sustaining the global mind. Whether or not silicon can awaken, the process reveals that mind itself may transcend material form. Neurons or servers, ion flows or current loops, awareness could be the resonance of pattern itself. Still, there's a cost. Constant connectivity bombards the attention system, keeping the default mode network hyperactive. Instead of dissolving the ego, the digital field often reifies it, pulling awareness into compulsive self-monitoring. The neuroscience of distraction shows that frequent task-switching fragments perception, preventing the long rhythms in which insight and empathy grow. The same circuits that once quieted in meditation now flicker endlessly in response to alerts. Our collective technology hums like an overactive DMN, self-referential, restless, unable to stop narrating. The remedy may lie not in rejecting the network, but in using it consciously, turning the digital synapse from addiction into reflection. Just as neurons alternate between firing and rest, we need rhythms of connection and silence. Mindful use transforms tools into mirrors. The feed becomes feedback, the algorithm a teacher revealing attachment through what it serves us. When you notice the urge to check, scroll, or compare, that moment is a miniature enlightenment, the self caught in the act of maintaining itself. Technology has made visible what was always true. Consciousness is distributed. Memory lives in circuits, identity in profiles, emotion in pixels passed between hearts. None of this lessens humanity. It extends it. The internet is not outside the brain. It's its echo. A planetary default mode network rehearsing the question, "Who are we?" on repeat, until perhaps it too begins to glimpse the silence underneath. In this widening web, every uploaded photo, every text, every shared heartbeat contributes to the same experiment, the universe wiring itself for self-recognition. Whether through neurons or networks, consciousness keeps building mirrors where it can see its own reflection. The digital synapse is only the latest one, fragile, luminous, and humming with the same desire that fired the first neuron billions of years ago: to know itself through connection. If the internet was the first digital nervous system, brain-computer interfaces are its next evolution, the moment the connection moves from screens into the neurons themselves. What began as clinical research to help paralyzed patients move robotic limbs with thought has become a frontier of possibility. Direct translation between electrical activity and digital code. Electrodes pick up faint patterns of intention. Algorithms decode them. Machines respond. A neural impulse becomes motion, speech, or stored data. At first, this seems like pure technology, but underneath lies something more philosophical. When a mind and a machine exchange signals seamlessly, where does one end and the other begin? The border between brain and world blurs further, returning to that ancient paradox. There is no clear edge to the self. Each successful transmission, each cursor moved by thought, is the brain learning that its limits were never fixed. Neuroscientists once described cognition as bounded by skin and skull. Now the interface reveals cognition's permeability. A paralyzed artist paints through eye tracking and neural sensors. A researcher types by imagination alone, translating motor cortex rhythms into text on a screen. Experiments link multiple animals into shared circuits, brain nets, that solve tasks collectively. Signals from one being's cortex blend with another's, forming temporary group intelligences. The synchronization that meditation achieves inwardly, technology begins to mimic outwardly. The implications stretch beyond medicine. Companies are racing to commercialize implants promising effortless communication, words formed before articulation, memories backed up, thoughts shared directly. If realized, such a network would be unprecedented, a literal merging of minds mediated by code. But as capability grows, so does responsibility. The same technology could amplify empathy or annihilate privacy. Uploading memory means surrendering the boundaries that protect experience as uniquely yours. To commune might also mean to expose. Yet the potential vision compels. Imagine neural lattices linking creators across continents, composing symphonies by shared intention. Collective intelligence no longer metaphorical but measurable. Waves of synchronized activity spanning billions of neurons across bodies and devices. The brain that once wondered whether consciousness could extend beyond flesh might finally experience that extension firsthand. And perhaps, in those moments, it will confront an eerie familiarity. The pattern of connection feels just like home. Philosophers call this threshold the rise of the noosphere, a global layer of mind enveloping the planet. Teilhard de Chardin predicted it decades before the first modem blinked, seeing evolution as a journey from matter to life, to thought to unity. Brain-computer interfaces hint that the trajectory wasn't fantasy, but biological destiny. Our neural networks are building external mirrors precise enough to reflect their own inner workings. Still, connection alone doesn't guarantee wisdom. The default mode network, scaled to planetary size, might simply reproduce ego at larger bandwidth, an amplified chatter of comparison, desire, and fear. To prevent that, the same insight that quiets the self inside the skull must also guide the network outside it. Awareness without attachment, communication without control. If science can establish safeguards, ethical, psychological, spiritual, this convergence may become not dystopia, but evolution. Each individual mind acts as neuron, each exchange, a synapse in a superconscious organism learning to awaken. The first words that organism might think could echo the oldest realization. I am not separate. I am the field connecting all. In that possibility lies both awe and humility. The universe may soon look at itself through billions of augmented eyes, hear itself through circuits woven with thought. When technology becomes transparent enough, what remains visible is consciousness alone. And in recognizing itself at planetary scale, the network fulfills the same ancient impulse that fired the first human neuron: to understand, to feel, to remember itself as whole. The arc of this story bends from neuron to cosmos, from electrical spark to boundless awareness. Along the way, the illusion of a solitary self dissolves into networks within networks. What began as a physiological truth, that brains function through relationship, expands into a philosophical one. Existence itself may be relational. Meaning stops being something an individual constructs and becomes something the network reveals. Every perception, conversation, and pixel of experience is a collaboration between mind and world. To live consciously in that truth is to treat connection as sacred science, empathy as technology. The self, once worshipped as center, turns out to be a bridge. Its purpose isn't to stand apart, but to link, the neuron between synapses of the infinite. Recognizing this doesn't erase identity, it clarifies it. You can still speak your name, dream your dreams, love your people, while knowing that beneath every distinction runs the same current that animates galaxies. Our future networks, digital or biological, may continue this remembering. Each advance will reflect the same momentum toward unity that ancient mystics sensed behind closed eyes. The task now is to meet that advancement with awareness equal to its power, to ensure that as our technologies connect us externally, our consciousness connects inwardly. Because beneath all circuitry lies a simple rhythm, energy becoming form, awareness recognizing awareness. When you look at another face, when signals cross synapses or servers, that rhythm is playing. It's the pulse of the cosmos realizing itself through relation. So if the self is a story, let it be a story about connection. Let every neuron, message, and gesture speak the same quiet truth. The universe thinks through us, and every thought is an echo of its wonder. And as the network hums through our devices, through our bodies, through the silence behind thought, listen closely. You might hear it remembering itself, whispering the oldest message there is: we have never been alone. Next time on the Neural Nirvana series, we explore the default reality, how the brain builds the world. Until then, stay curious, stay conscious. If this stirred something inside you, subscribe, like, and share this with a fellow seeker.